The worst drought in decades had turned an entire county into dust. Crops were dying, rivers were shrinking, and farmers were preparing for another devastating season. Then one man did something that made everyone stop and stare. His name was Elijah. Instead of buying expensive new equipment, he spent his last savings on a pile of rusted, decades-old irrigation pipes. As he loaded the battered metal onto his trailer, neighbors couldn't stop laughing. As the drought finally made him lose his mind, one farmer joked. "Those pipes belong in a scrapyard, not on a farm," another shouted. Elijah never looked up. He kept loading every pipe with quiet determination, ignoring every insult. What no one knew was that those rusty pipes were about to uncover a forgotten secret buried beneath the land, a discovery that could save not only Elijah's farm, but the entire county. The people laughing today would soon be asking him one question: how did you know? Stay with us until the end because this incredible story. If this story inspired you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what lesson you took away from her incredible journey. Proves that sometimes the greatest opportunity is hidden inside what everyone else throws away. Introduction. Elijah Carter had spent his entire life on the same family farm in the heart of rural America. His grandfather had cleared the land with nothing but a team of horses and relentless determination. His father had expanded it, believing that hard work could overcome almost any challenge. Now the responsibility rested on Elijah's shoulders, but the farm he loved was in trouble. For 3 straight years, the rains had become more unpredictable. The fields that once produced healthy harvests had turned dry and cracked. Every season seemed harder than the last. The family's savings had disappeared, fuel prices kept rising, and the bank was sending reminder after reminder that another missed payment could cost Elijah everything his family had built over generations. Every morning before sunrise, Elijah walked through the dusty fields, hoping to find a reason to believe things could still change. He ran handfuls of dry soil through his fingers and remembered when these same fields had been green with healthy crops. At home, the pressure was just as heavy. His wife tried to stay hopeful, carefully stretching every dollar to keep food on the table. Their children watched quietly as their parents worried about bills they couldn't afford to pay. Even simple repairs had become impossible because there wasn't enough money left. Many people in the community believed Elijah should give up. Some told him to sell the farm before the debt became worse. Others said farming had no future anymore. They laughed whenever he talked about finding a way to save the land. But Elijah refused to quit. He believed that as long as he still owned the farm, there was still hope. Instead of walking away, he searched for old equipment, repaired broken tools, and studied forgotten irrigation methods that earlier generations had used during dry years. People mocked him as he loaded rusty irrigation pipes onto an old trailer. To everyone else, it looked like worthless scrap metal. They couldn't understand why he was wasting his time. What they didn't know was that Elijah wasn't loading junk. He was loading the last chance to save his family's farm. And before long, those rusty pipes would change everything in a way no one expected. Everyone mocked his plan. With no money left to buy modern irrigation equipment, Elijah knew he had 2 choices: give up and watch his family's farm die, or find another way. He chose the harder path. Every morning before sunrise, Elijah drove across the county looking for anything he could use. He stopped at abandoned farms, old barns, scrapyards, and fence lines where broken irrigation pipes had been thrown away years earlier. Most of the pipes were rusty, dented, or cracked. To everyone else, they were nothing more than junk. But Elijah saw possibility where others saw waste. His trailer slowly filled with discarded pipes, old valves, and worn-out fittings. As he hauled them home, neighbors couldn't hide their laughter. "Have you started a junk collection business?" one farmer shouted. Another laughed. "Those pipes couldn't water a flower, let alone a farm." Soon, everyone in town had heard about Elijah's strange project. Some people shook their heads with pity. Others simply laughed whenever they saw him drive by. Elijah never argued. He simply smiled and kept working. Every evening, after hours in the fields, he returned to his small farmhouse. There, he opened a dusty wooden box that had belonged to his grandfather. Inside were old farming booklets filled with handwritten notes, faded diagrams, and practical ideas from a time when farmers had to rely on creativity instead of expensive machinery. For hours each night, Elijah studied every page. He compared sketches, took notes, and measured the slope of his land over and over again. One idea kept catching his attention, a gravity-fed irrigation system that used the natural downhill flow of water instead of electric pumps. If he could build it correctly, gravity would do the work for free. The idea sounded simple, but building it was anything but easy. He cleaned every rusty pipe, patched the leaks, replaced broken joints, and carefully laid each section across the fields. Sometimes an entire day's work had to be redone because one pipe sat at the wrong angle. Other days, fittings burst apart before he could finish. The setbacks were exhausting. Meanwhile, the laughter never stopped. People drove past just to watch. Some even brought friends to see what they called Elijah's scrapyard farm. They said he was wasting precious time chasing an impossible dream. Even a local supplier refused to help him, saying, "You'll never grow a crop with garbage." Those words hurt, but they didn't stop him. Deep inside, Elijah remembered something his grandfather had always said. A farmer who refuses to quit has already planted the seeds of success. Those words became his strength. Day after day, Elijah continued working until, at last, the final pipe was connected. He stood quietly at the edge of the field, looking over the homemade irrigation system he had built with little more than determination, discarded materials, and his grandfather's wisdom. Now came the moment of truth. Would the water flow through the system and save his crops? Or would everyone who mocked him be proven right? The first test of Elijah's gravity-fed irrigation system ended in disaster. As the small crowd gathered at the edge of his field, Elijah opened the main valve with hopeful hands. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then water rushed into the old pipes. Everyone leaned forward. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed across the field. One pipe joint burst apart, spraying muddy water into the air. Another connection split open farther down the line. Within seconds, precious water was pouring into the dirt instead of reaching the crops. Laughter erupted. There goes another one of Elijah's inventions. "I told you those rusty pipes belonged in the scrapyard." Someone recorded the entire failure on a phone and uploaded it online. By evening, the video had spread across the county. Thousands of people mocked him. The comments were cruel. "Stick to farming. Engineers exist for a reason." "This is the funniest irrigation system ever built." Elijah read every comment in silence. That night, he sat alone in the workshop, surrounded by broken fittings and leaking pipes. Every failed connection told the same story. He had underestimated the pressure. The old pipe joints couldn't handle the flow. His father walked in quietly. "You've barely slept in days," he said. "Maybe they're right. Maybe you've done enough." Elijah looked down at the cracked pipe in his hands. "If I quit now," he replied softly, "they'll remember the failure. If I keep going, maybe one day they'll remember why I never stopped." The next morning, he began again. He scavenged stronger connectors from abandoned equipment, reinforced every weak joint with homemade steel clamps, and redesigned the entire pipeline section by section. Every leak taught him something new. Every failure became another lesson, but fixing the pipes came with a cost. He sold his old pickup truck to buy valves and repair materials. Friends stopped visiting. Bills piled up on the kitchen table. Even his family began wondering how much longer they could survive. Then another problem struck. The weather forecast announced that the worst heat wave in years would arrive within 5 days. If the irrigation system wasn't working before then, the young crops would almost certainly dry out. Standing in the middle of his field at sunset, Elijah stared across the unfinished pipeline. This wasn't just about proving people wrong anymore. It was about saving everything his family had left. He tightened one final pipe joint and whispered to himself, "One more try." Would this final redesign finally work? Or would the coming heat wave destroy his dream before he had one last chance to prove everyone wrong? The heat wave arrived exactly as the forecast had warned. Day after day, the sun scorched the county. Streams dried up, the ground cracked open, and fields that had looked healthy only weeks before began turning brown. One by one, farmers watched their soybean crops wither under the relentless heat. But something was different on Elijah's farm. As water flowed steadily through his repaired gravity-fed irrigation system, every row of soybeans remained green. The reinforced pipe joints held firm. Not a single leak appeared. The water reached every corner of the field, just as Elijah had planned. Within days, people from across the county came to see it with their own eyes. The same neighbors who had laughed when he loaded rusty pipes onto his trailer stood silently at the edge of his field. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. One farmer finally stepped forward. "Elijah," he said, lowering his head, "would you teach us how you built this?" Elijah smiled. "I'll teach anyone who's willing to learn." Soon, farmers worked side by side, rebuilding old irrigation systems using the lessons Elijah had learned through months of failure. The man everyone had mocked had become the person everyone trusted. A few weeks later, the soybean harvest exceeded every expectation. The healthy crop attracted a specialty buyer, bringing in enough income not only to save the season, but also to secure the future of the family farm. That evening, Elijah's father gathered the family on the front porch. With tears in his eyes, he smiled and said, "The farm isn't going anywhere. We don't have to sell it." For a long moment, no one spoke. Elijah looked across the fields that nearly broke him. He remembered every broken pipe, every leak, every sleepless night, and every person who said it was impossible. Then he quietly said, "They saw junk. I saw one more chance." Sometimes success doesn't begin with expensive equipment or perfect conditions. Sometimes it begins with determination, patience, and the courage to keep improving after every failure. What others called worthless became the very tool that protected a family's future. Disclaimer: this is a fictional story created for entertainment and inspiration. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling us what lesson inspired you the most. We'll see you in the next story.